Why is it that some of the greatest artists, writers, painters, musicians who give us beauty, meaning, and joy so often live lives of despair? Why do we hear about tortured poets, alcoholic painters, depressed musicians, lonely filmmakers? Think about it. Vincent van Gogh, who gave the world paintings that now hang in the most prestigious museums, died penniless and by his own hand. Sylvia Plath, whose words gave voice to generations, ended her life at 30. Kurt Cobain, adored by millions, couldn't bear to keep living. It seems like art and unhappiness are bound together. The tortured artist's stereotype isn't just a cliche, it has roots in reality. But why? Today we're going to dive deep into this question. Why are artists unhappy? We'll explore the psychology, the philosophy, and even the neuroscience behind it. We'll uncover how creativity is both a blessing and a curse, and why the very things that make someone an artist can also make them deeply restless, isolated, and dissatisfied. By the end, you'll see that this unhappiness isn't meaningless. It's part of what drives art itself. The image of the tortured artist has fascinated us for centuries. We romanticize it. The lonely genius scribbling in candlelight, pouring their pain into canvases and symphonies. Society almost expects artists to be miserable. But is it just a myth? Or is there truth in it? Research shows there really is a correlation between artistic temperament and mood disorders. Studies of writers, for instance, reveal higher rates of depression and bipolar disorder compared to the general population. In one famous study, psychiatrist Nancy Andreasen found that 80% of writers she interviewed had experienced mood disturbances. But the relationship isn't simple. It's not that unhappiness automatically makes someone creative or that all artists are doomed to suffer. Instead, it's about sensitivity. Artists tend to be more open, emotionally raw, and attuned to the world. That openness makes them capable of seeing beauty and also pain more vividly than most. Think of it like this. Artists don't just look at life, they feel it deeply. A sunset doesn't just look pretty, it makes them ache. A passing heartbreak doesn't just sting, it becomes a wound they can't shake off. So the tortured artist isn't just a myth, it's an exaggeration of a truth. That creating art often requires you to open yourself to experiences that can overwhelm you. To create, you have to feel. But feeling deeply is exhausting. Psychologists call this trait high sensitivity. About 15 to 20% of people fall into this category, and many artists do. Sensitive people notice subtleties, are easily overstimulated, and feel emotions more intensely. Imagine walking through the world without any skin. Everything touches you and everything hurts. That's the inner life of many artists. When you're that open, you notice beauty others miss. You hear music in the hum of the city. You see poetry in a stranger's eyes. But you also notice cruelty, emptiness, and loss more sharply. The world's wounds become your wounds. This explains why many artists struggle with loneliness and despair. They can't just brush things off. Their nervous system won't let them. And here's the paradox. Without that sensitivity, their art might not exist. Van Gogh painted Starry Night because he felt the sky in a way most of us never could. Sylvia Plath wrote her searing poetry because she lived emotions most of us would suppress. So sensitivity is both the gift and the curse. It creates beauty, but it also creates unbearable weight. Another reason artists are often unhappy lies in their obsession with meaning. Most people live without constantly questioning life's purpose. They go to work, come home, watch TV, and get through the day. But artists rarely accept that. They feel compelled to ask, why am I here? What does this mean? What's the point? This constant questioning can drive someone to madness. The existentialists understood this well. Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Friedrich Nietzsche wrestled with the meaninglessness of life. But where philosophers wrote about it, artists felt it. Take Franz Kafka. His novels weren't just abstract thought experiments. They were cries of despair from a man who felt trapped in an absurd world. The artist's job is to confront reality, strip away illusions, and tell the truth. But the truth isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's unbearable. This is why happiness often feels inaccessible to artists. Happiness thrives on simplicity, being present, letting go, enjoying small pleasures. But the artistic temperament rebels against simplicity. It wants depth, intensity, transcendence. And when the world can't provide that, the artist feels empty. The very pursuit of meaning that fuels their art also makes ordinary life feel unsatisfying. Art is often a lonely path. Unlike most professions, art requires solitude, hours of writing, painting, composing, or practicing. It's work that pulls you away from the social fabric of life. Even when artists are surrounded by people, they often feel misunderstood. How do you explain the endless rewriting of a single sentence, or the obsession with a shade of blue? Most people can't relate. This isolation can lead to alienation. Van Gogh wrote hundreds of letters to his brother Theo, desperate for connection because hardly anyone else could understand him. Emily Dickinson spent most of her life in near seclusion, her poetry a kind of secret dialogue with the world. And here's the irony: artists create to connect, to communicate something universal. But the process of creating often cuts them off from others. Socially too, artists can feel out of place. They value truth over politeness, beauty over money, imagination over convention. These priorities don't always fit well into society's structures. So the artist ends up in a paradox, craving connection but trapped in solitude, speaking truths but often unheard. That tension breeds unhappiness. Another source of unhappiness is the pressure that comes with creating. Art is never finished, it's abandoned. As the saying goes, every work falls short of the artist's vision. That gap between the dream and the reality is painful. Perfectionism haunts many artists. They chase an impossible standard, and the result is often self-loathing. The novelist never feels their book is good enough. The painter sees flaws no one else notices. The musician hears mistakes in every performance. Add to this the external pressures: fame, rejection, financial instability. Artists pour their soul into work only to face indifference or criticism. A lifetime of rejection letters can crush even the strongest spirit. For some, success makes it worse. Once you achieve recognition, the fear of losing it, or of not living up to expectations, can be paralyzing. Think of musicians who crumble under the weight of their own fame, unable to create without fear of disappointing millions. So the act of creation, which should bring joy, often brings suffering. The very drive to express oneself becomes a burden. Science offers another angle on why artists are unhappy. Research shows that creativity is linked to unusual brain activity, especially in the default mode network, the part of the brain active when we're daydreaming or reflecting. Highly creative people show greater connectivity between brain regions that usually don't communicate. But here's the catch: the same brain patterns associated with creativity also overlap with vulnerability to mood disorders. Bipolar disorder, for instance, has been linked to heightened creativity. Mania fuels bursts of inspirations, while depression drags the artist into despair. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation, also plays a role. Creative work often depends on dopamine highs, moments of insight, flow, or artistic breakthrough. But when dopamine crashes, so does mood. In other words, the creative brain is wired for both brilliance and instability. The very neural mechanisms that produce art also predispose the artist to suffering. So far, this sounds bleak. Are artists doomed to unhappiness? Not necessarily. While suffering may fuel some art, it's not the only path. Many artists find joy in creation, community, and purpose. The difference lies in how one relates to suffering. Some artists are consumed by their pain, while others transform it. Think of Maya Angelou, who endured trauma but turned it into poetry that uplifted millions. Or Beethoven, who composed transcendent music despite deafness. Happiness for artists may not look like ordinary happiness. It's less about comfort and more about meaning. It's not about avoiding pain, but using it. In fact, many artists report that the act of creating brings them moments of pure joy, what psychologists call flow, when time disappears and the self dissolves into the work. Those moments don't erase suffering, but they balance it. So yes, artists can be happy, but often in ways different from what society defines as happiness. So why are artists unhappy? Because they feel more, see more, and question more than most. Because their sensitivity, their search for meaning, their isolation, and their struggle with perfection all weigh heavily on them. Because their brains are wired for both creativity and instability. But here's the paradox. The very unhappiness that haunts artists is also what fuels their art. Without it, we might not have Van Gogh's swirling skies, Plath's searing poems, or Cobain's haunting music. Artists live closer to the edge of life, closer to beauty, closer to despair. And in walking that edge, they give the rest of us something invaluable, a glimpse of the raw truth of existence. Maybe the real lesson isn't that artists are doomed to unhappiness, but that unhappiness, when faced with courage and creativity, can become something luminous. Because in the end, art is the alchemy of turning suffering into beauty. Thank you.